Hello there. Today is a brief update on the responses I've received from my previous YouTube video critique. Black British artist responds to Mark Quinn. The following points represent not only these dialogues but my observations of the various reactions to A Surge of Power that I've witnessed from artists, online, art, social media, institutions and the general public to Mark Quinn's and Jen Reid's collaborative and unsolicited public art intervention. My last response warranted a lengthy critique and questioning of intention and motive behind this sculpture. This post-observation does not. And to make sure this address remains brief, I've chosen to write and read this out, and it's simply to aid a much more clearer and succinct understanding for the viewer and the listener. At art school, we're often told by our beloved technicians, the first rule of sculpture is how does it stand? Does a sculpture need its own plinth to suggest gravitas, or does it require to hold its narrative amongst its audience to be interactive and accessible at surface level, for example? Since the removal of the Edward Colston Memorial, it seems now that the sculpture itself no longer wields its enduring power over Bristol public discourse. Now the remaining Colston plinth does. The very foundation of how the statue stood for over a century is ironically the very embodiment of the varied institutions which kept the name of Colston to be immortalised within the living fabric of Bristol history. Now the plinth no longer has a statue. It seems the current priority is the exchange and transfer of visual power. We need a fifth plinth, many exclaim. In addition to the fourth plinth in London's Trafalgar Square. Although one could strongly argue, why do we need to keep the Colston plinth at all? I mean, who has benefited the most from metropolitan London's fourth plinth? What's the visual message of a black power salute set upon a historical Bristol plinth? Are we attempting to raise historic foundations, or is this just suspiciously redirecting its vast resources for minority benefit? A surge of power indeed. In my opinion, this new visual power transfer is pernicious. Do we dare not question its motives, intentions, objectives, or inquire about its main beneficiaries? It might be wise and very prudent to do so. Why? Otherwise, public works in the future that supposedly narrate our struggle for the vast majority of spectators in the future only represent that struggle. These works, however temporary they may be, will likely suffer the same fate as the Colston statue, that being another unwarranted memorial thrown in the harbour, this time discarded in the murky depths by Bristol's silent majority. It has been very, very interesting to observe the initial delight and excitement many in the metropolitan-based arts and national media had for Mark Quinn's intervention the morning it was erected. only to wholesale question the irresponsibility of this white male, wealthy, privileged, cisgender artist once the general public and the art world response became sour after it was quickly removed by Bristol City Council. It is also interesting how this discourse has remained the same and has been maintained. Hardly any nuance of the plethora of denunciations was given to the other responsible collaborators, potential beneficiaries and organisers of this intervention, that many of them in fact happen to be black. It's all the fault of this wealthy white cis male's overt extension of his white privilege. No? It's also been very interesting how those that benefited greatly from the art world's institutional and systematic racism have commented. And to be fair, in full transparent disclosure, that's me included. Apart from the obvious hard work and perseverance required over the years, many have rightly gained support, curatorial validations, commissions, biennale exhibitions, etc. Some go on to become the institutional go-to artists of colour, whose work those same institutions actually cite almost as the prophets and arbiters of black UK visual narrative and or black UK experience. It would appear that some of these were chosen over many, many others to culturally represent, condemn Quinn's sculpture and with consent lightly bite the hand that feeds. Very interesting. First to be called when reputation or representation is required, first to be highlighted and their responses consistently repeated to publicise their condemnation, anger, offence, disappointment about white people, privilege, etc. by those very institutions and national media that initially first loved the Quinn intervention, that now seemingly need to circle the wagons quickly using these black artist publicised disapprovals as a way to support their well-meaning BLM mea culpas. No one likes to get cancelled, do they? Plus ça change. The more things change, the more they stay the same. War. I've had many artists around the world contact me directly after my last video response with messages of thanks, support and agreement to the main thrusts of my critique to Mark Quinn's A Surge of Power, Jen Reed. The main thematic thread of these wonderful and insightful dialogues were to congratulate me for showing the bravery of putting my head above the parapet and directly commenting on the insanity of watching what goes on upon the no man's land of the culture war. Oh, and if anyone states that a culture war doesn't exist, they're either very ignorant of the evidence, directly lying to your face, stand to directly profit from the current cultural malaise, suffer cognitive dissonance while attempting to mentally self-censor and or work within our creative industries within a very privileged and safe echo chamber bubble. The very instance that all of these very diverse artists I spoke to, without exception, recognized that the conversation we were actually having could not be repeated or instigated in any art environment scenario. Points to the very existence of a culture war. What I'm about to suggest in conclusion this time is not putting my head above the parapet, but both head and shoulders into the scopes of a rapid firing range. The arts is conducting a diversity myth. Whilst representation is definitely an important, justifiable and laudable objective, how the term diversity is actually used often masks the real face of the arts today. I've studied and worked within the arts in the UK for most of my adult life. Within that time, I've helped pioneer exhibitions and interventions of minority voices across every spectrum, and inclusivity for the audience and supporting artists' professional development has and will always number amongst my highest priority in my artist practice. I have been very privileged and honoured to have participated in international conferences and biennales, notably in South Korea and Barbados, contributing to panel discussions on public arts, support for artists. While all are represented, we all look the same. We sound the same. We dig the same politics. That is not diversity. That is groupthink and growing homogenization of ideas, and that little safe echo chamber bubble created from all of this is now dangerously becoming our new intolerant cultural mainstream. It is almost that we see the power of art, ideas and innovation reduced to just a mere means to an end for the gain of the power of ideology in this culture war. Remember, no one could truly claim victory on no man's land. It became a mass graveyard of youthful potential. My concern from all of this is that limiting freedom of expression and adopting the self-censor mindset within the arts only in the long term harms the artist, which unwittingly becomes disregarded cannon fodder for those well-paid administrators and a host of radicalized social media warlords that believe that public art that is solely prescriptive for its audience should be gained the opportunity to be consumed, rather than transformational and transcendental presentations that hope to unify and harmonize instead of just the constant post-modernist paths of deconstruction and confrontation. When one interrogates, it doesn't prohibit the need to listen, research and respond. Rarely do we witness an objective to dialogue in public art, to reach a depth in humanity that we all possess, regardless of the diversity of thought. Finally, my apprehension is that the further we hasten down the path of cultural conformity, uniformity, moral homogeneity, and groupthink, we actually limit our capacity for innovation within the arts to truly embrace diverse new audiences, new platforms, and new appeal for the arts among our disparate public, and in turn support the work of far more artists, especially the ones currently unknown. Are we negating the presence of a massive audience out there just because they potentially don't think like us? Or maybe we are inwardly admitting to ourselves that we actually negate the power of art as a catalyst for positive, universal and value creative change. Yet more creative internal food for thought. Many thanks and gratitudes to all those that were inspired to contact me after my last YouTube address. Greatly appreciated our inspiring, wonderful and insightful dialogues and some very, very long awaited catch-ups. Stay happy and healthy. One love.